There's definitely been signature styles throughout the history of New Zealand houses. You look in Wellington and there's definitely, you can tell the different epochs of houses coming through, and you go into any community and we really see the 30s state houses and what they look like. You go into Ponsonby and you look what the workers' houses used to look like back then.
Between the World Wars, Dennis Glover wrote a poem that touches on elements of a national identity, or what Pākehā New Zealanders were coming to see as their new and different home. I do not dream of Sussex Downs or quaint old England's quaint old towns. I think of what may yet be seen in Johnsonville or Geraldine. In this episode, we ask architects and commentators if they think we have a distinctive New Zealand house style. And if so, where does it come from? Does it owe more to our recent history or our current lifestyle? What are the influences and the opportunities?
Well, after the war, there was an effort by Vernon Brown and then the group architects to consider, well, what is an Aotearoa New Zealand style? And they certainly did, as a group, begin to look at Maori architecture, some of the open plan elements, the less formal dimensions of our residential designs began to come through. From that period onwards, our architectural style has probably become more international and more influenced by the external environment.
Well, yeah, New Zealand housing is really interesting, and for many years I edited Home magazine, and we would get overseas judges to come to New Zealand to choose the best house that had been built in New Zealand in the past year. Always designed by architects, and often quite expensive homes in beautiful locations, but also there was a whole range of prices. And it was interesting to see New Zealand through the eyes of these foreign architects, because they saw it as a place of great opportunity. Yes, they felt that New Zealand didn't have a distinctive architectural style, but they were usually amazed that people had the opportunities to create new homes that they did, because these opportunities often didn't exist in the UK or in France or other European countries, or even in the big cities in the US.
The architectural houses that are winning the awards and things in New Zealand are actually fantastically, beautifully well designed, because we're free from that historical baggage. So New Zealand in Britain, people still want houses, perhaps not with a thatched roof, but they still want a brick house with a pointy roof and small windows. And New Zealand doesn't have that. We've grown up in the age of modernism. We've said, if you want a big picture window, you have a big picture window. If you want the whole wall of glass, you do that. And that's why the design programs always come to New Zealand and they're like, wow, this is amazing, because we don't have that back home. And I think that our New Zealand attitude towards things, if you want it, you can do, the sort of can-do attitude, means that we have housing design that can be invigorating and innovative and exciting and beautiful and modern. All the time it's modern.
I don't think today there is a typical Kiwi house, because, there isn't a typical Kiwi. We have people that live on their own, we have huge big families, we have different makeups, we've got wide range of ethnic groups, we've got different just styles of living these days. We've got people that want to live in cities and be close to everything and live in city environments. You've only got to look at the number of people living in Auckland City, but you've still got people that want to be on rural blocks and lifestyle blocks and that rural side. So I don't think we've got a standard Kiwi house anymore, which to me is quite exciting, because that diversity brings also vibrancy, and it all adds to sort of what we do in creating our thriving, vibrant communities.
There's this notion of style and substance, and you'd have to say that from a Māori perspective, it is really about pragmatic solutions. Meet the needs of those at the coalface, those who are working in the kitchens, those who are laying out the mattresses, those who are wanting to keep the temperature at some sort of level of comfort. So, yeah, so it's very much about buildings which really work for the people who are in them most of the time.
But is there a Maori influence on our contemporary housing style?
Up until the 60s, and none of our architecture included anything to do with anything more than an entry porch. That was really the only gesture towards accepting the realm between outside and in. I guess the maho, the Maori porch feature of domestic Maori buildings and our meeting houses was a key element of Maori architecture, which has always been with us. And I think whether it directly influenced our decks and verandas and so on is a moot point, but certainly we've begun to see the notion of outdoor rooms as a real thing, and Māori always had their outdoor rooms, which was the maho.
The 50s and 60s are referenced a lot as a turning point for style, and it was then that the suburban population exploded both here and internationally. And the look and feel of those suburbs has continued to change.
You see all these new suburbs springing up on city fringes now, and I find the housing in that pretty resolutely depressing. You don't see people in the street very often. The streetscapes themselves are monstered by these enormous garage doors, and people have designed the homes to occupy as much of the site as possible. So there aren't really even lawns or gardens for people to occupy out the front or the back. And so it means that we've created these suburbs that feel pretty dead, and that's often because they're designed around the needs of drivers.
It was deemed to be a valid way to develop in the 50s and 60s. And so in so many respects, it was imposed on us. But suburban living is terribly reclusive. You know, one leaves one's place of work in your car, you drive home, you pull up your drive, you either literally or metaphorically close your gate and go into your garage and close your garage door and go inside. You're locked away. And then you decide to go to do some shopping, and you will drive out and drive to the supermarket and go and do your shopping and come back home and do the same again. It's terribly reclusive.
Inherent in some of the designs for these suburban houses is the expectation that a Kiwi family will move through a number of dwellings in their lifetime, and capital gains and resale value are factors.
The kind of effect of this focus on housing as a commodity has really damaged New Zealand, because very few people think about their houses as a place to live for a very long time, which means that houses are built with a very short-term focus rather than thinking of them as lasting for decades or even for generations and holding people comfortably over a longer period of time. Our desire for speed and short-term efficiency means that we haven't thought about the environmental effects of housing, both in terms of their carbon output, but in terms of the level of amenity they're not only providing for their occupants, but visually in the way they give to the cities and towns that they occupy as a whole.
Environmental considerations weren't factors in the early days of house building in New Zealand when, for example, asbestos was used. Looking forward, will new sustainable or circular materials mean shifts in house and building styles?
We have a lot of work to do around not only building so that we are embodying carbon and sequestering carbon into our buildings, but also looking at the materials we're using. Building in Europe, and this was over 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we were already really constrained about what building materials we could use. And here, we're putting toxic materials into houses, and we don't want to get to a situation. I was talking with a developer who was doing a 300 apartment build in Luxembourg, and they had an obligation to do 30% repurposed, so circular economy materials into their building, and everything that was going in there was they were ensuring that once that building got to the end of its life, it could be dismantled and then rebuilt into and repurposed into something else. So our understanding of how the building sector can become a fully circular sector or economy really has to improve, as does the design to make sure that we're sequestering carbon.
And of course, if our style is also influenced by climate, energy, transport and work and leisure, then this will inevitably flow through to the design and style of our New Zealand houses.
This program was made possible by the RNZ NZ On Air Innovation Fund.